Why do avoidant partners seem relieved when you finally give up and walk away? It's the most confusing thing about loving an avoidant. They act like they want you around, but somehow everything they do pushes you toward the exit. They say they care, but their behavior suggests they'd be happier if you just disappeared. They claim they want the relationship to work, but they sabotage it at every turn. What if I told you this isn't accidental? What if there's something happening in their psychology that actually requires you to leave for them to feel emotionally safe again? Think about it like someone with a severe food allergy. They might love the smell of peanuts, might even crave them sometimes, but their body literally needs them to stay away to survive. That's what's happening with avoidance and emotional intimacy. Except the allergy is psychological, not physical. Understanding this dynamic will change everything about how you see avoidant behavior, and more importantly, how you respond to it. To understand why avoidants need you to leave, you first have to understand what's really happening inside their emotional world when you're together. Most people think avoidants are simply scared of commitment or afraid of being hurt. But it's much more complicated than that. Imagine trying to breathe while someone is pressing on your chest. You're not angry at the person. You don't hate them, but you desperately need them to stop pressing so you can breathe normally again. That's what intimate connection feels like to an avoidant. Not painful exactly, but suffocating in a way they can't explain or control. Avoidants learned early in life that emotional needs were dangerous. Maybe their caregivers were inconsistent, or maybe they were overwhelmed by a child's emotional intensity. Either way, the avoidant's nervous system developed with one core message: emotional closeness equals emotional danger. So when you love them consistently and want emotional intimacy, you're not just asking for connection, you're triggering their deepest survival instincts. Your love, no matter how healthy and appropriate, feels like a threat to the emotional system that keeps them functioning. This creates an impossible situation for them. They want love, but love feels dangerous. They crave connection, but connection triggers panic. They need you, but needing you feels like dying. What makes this even more complicated is that avoidants often don't recognize this internal conflict consciously. They experience the symptoms, feeling suffocated, irritated, or overwhelmed when you get close. But they interpret these feelings as relationship problems rather than nervous system responses. So they start blaming external factors. Maybe you're too needy. Maybe you want too much too fast. Maybe you're just incompatible. They're not lying when they say these things. They genuinely believe them because they can't see that their discomfort comes from internal wiring, not external circumstances. This is why the same patterns repeat with different partners. An avoidant might think their last relationship failed because their ex was too clingy, so they choose someone more independent next time. But when that person also wants normal emotional intimacy, the same suffocating feelings arise. It's like someone who gets motion sick in every car, blaming the drivers instead of recognizing they have a motion sensitivity problem. They're not making excuses. They genuinely don't understand that the issue is internal, not external. Most people think the solution is patience, understanding, or gradually building trust. But sometimes the avoidance emotional system can only reset when the threat is completely removed. And you, unfortunately, represent that threat, not because you're actually dangerous, but because their nervous system can't tell the difference. Now here's where it gets really complicated. Avoidants don't consciously want you to leave, but their unconscious mind starts working overtime to make that happen. It's like their emotional system has its own agenda that conflicts with their conscious desires. They start doing things that push you away without realizing why. They become more distant, more critical, more emotionally unavailable. They create conflicts out of nothing. They withdraw affection right when you need it most. They make you feel like you're asking for too much when you're asking for basic relationship necessities. But there's something more complex happening. They're not doing this to hurt you. They're doing it because their emotional system is trying to solve an internal problem by creating external distance. Your presence, no matter how loving, creates internal tension they can't resolve any other way. Think of it like someone with insomnia trying to sleep while music is playing. The music might be beautiful, they might even love that particular song, but their brain can't relax until the music stops. Your love is the music, and their emotional system is the brain that can't rest until there's silence. This is why reasoning with them doesn't work. This is why proving your love doesn't work. This is why patience and understanding often just prolong the inevitable. You're trying to solve a logical problem, but they're dealing with a nervous system response that operates below the level of conscious thought. As the tension in the relationship builds, something interesting starts happening in the avoidance psychology. They begin to unconsciously create situations that will justify your eventual departure. Not because they want you to leave consciously, but because their emotional system needs a reason for the distance it's trying to create. They start noticing everything you do wrong and ignoring everything you do right. They magnify small conflicts into relationship-ending problems. They interpret your normal human needs as evidence that you're too needy or demanding. They frame your desire for emotional connection as proof that you're incompatible. This isn't conscious manipulation, it's unconscious self-protection. Their emotional system is building a case for why the relationship should end, so that when it does end, they can feel justified rather than guilty about the outcome. What's particularly insidious about this process is how it twists reality to fit their emotional needs. Normal relationship requests become evidence of incompatibility. Healthy expressions of love become proof that you're too intense. Basic emotional needs become signs that you're demanding too much. They start rewriting the history of your relationship through this distorted lens. Moments that were previously sweet and connecting get reinterpreted as red flags they should have noticed earlier. Your strengths become flaws. Your care becomes neediness. Your consistency becomes boring predictability. This mental gymnastics serves a specific function. It makes your eventual departure feel inevitable rather than chosen. If you're truly incompatible, if you really are too much for them to handle, then losing you isn't their fault. It's just the natural consequence of a mismatch that was always there. Meanwhile, you're getting more and more frustrated because nothing you do seems to help. The harder you try to connect, the more they pull away. The more love you show, the more reasons they find to be dissatisfied. You start feeling like you're in a relationship with someone who doesn't actually want to be with you. And in a way, that's exactly what's happening, except it's not the conscious them that doesn't want you. It's the unconscious survival system that learned long ago that emotional closeness equals emotional danger. Your natural responses to their distance make the problem worse. When they pull away, you try to get closer. When they become critical, you try to prove your worth. When they create conflict, you try to resolve it. All normal, healthy responses that unfortunately trigger more of the very behavior you're trying to stop. You're unknowingly participating in a psychological dance where every step you take toward them forces them to take a step back. Not because they don't love you, but because love itself has become the problem their nervous system is trying to solve. The cruel irony is that the more you love them, the more their system interprets you as a threat. Your consistency makes them feel trapped. Your affection makes them feel suffocated. Your desire for emotional intimacy makes them feel like they're drowning. None of this is logical or fair, but it's how their emotional wiring works. It's like trying to hug someone who has a broken rib. The closer you get, the more pain you cause, even though your intention is to provide comfort. This is why traditional relationship advice often backfires with avoidance. Communicate more makes them feel pressured. Show more affection makes them feel overwhelmed. Work on intimacy makes them want to run. The very solutions that would help most relationships make avoidant relationships worse. Understanding this doesn't make their behavior acceptable, but it does explain why loving an avoidant often feels like trying to love someone who's allergic to love itself. Here comes the most disturbing revelation of all. Your eventual departure serves a specific psychological function for the avoidant that nothing else can provide. When you finally give up and leave, you're not just ending the relationship, you're solving their internal emotional crisis. Think about what happens in their mind when you walk away. Suddenly the suffocating feeling stops. The emotional pressure lifts. The internal conflict between wanting you and needing distance resolves itself in favor of distance. Their nervous system can finally relax because the perceived threat is gone. But it's more than just relief. Your departure validates every unconscious belief they have about relationships and emotional intimacy. It proves that people leave when things get difficult. It confirms that emotional needs are too much for others to handle. It reinforces the idea that independence is safer than connection. Your departure doesn't just end the relationship. It provides psychological evidence that their avoidance strategies were correct all along. It's like a person with agoraphobia having a panic attack in public and then using that experience as proof that leaving the house is dangerous. This is why many avoidants seem surprisingly okay after difficult breakups. They're not heartless or uncaring. They're experiencing profound relief that the internal conflict has been resolved. The part of them that loved you is grieving, but the part that needed you to leave is finally at peace. Some avoidants even seem to thrive immediately after breakups in ways that can be deeply hurtful to their former partners. They might suddenly seem more social, more confident, more like their old selves. This isn't because they didn't care about you. It's because the psychological pressure that was building while you were together has finally been released. It's similar to how someone might feel energized and relieved after finally quitting a job that was slowly burning them out. They're not celebrating the loss of the job itself, but the relief from the constant stress they were under. This post-breakup thriving often confuses and hurts the people who loved them. How can someone seem so much better after losing a relationship with someone who loved them deeply? The answer is that for avoidance, losing the relationship isn't just losing love, it's also losing the source of their internal emotional conflict. There's another layer to this that makes it even more psychologically complex. Avoidants would much rather be left than have to do the leaving themselves. Being abandoned allows them to maintain their self-image as someone who's willing to commit while avoiding the guilt that comes with ending a relationship with someone who loves them. When you leave, they get to be the victim instead of the perpetrator. They get to feel hurt and confused instead of guilty and responsible. They get to tell themselves and others that they were willing to work on things, but you gave up on them. Being the one who gets left allows them to maintain their self-image as a good person who's just misunderstood, rather than someone who's emotionally unavailable and hurtful to people who love them. Your departure allows them to avoid facing the reality of how their emotional limitations affect others. It's like someone who keeps showing up late to everything but never takes responsibility for their lateness. They'd rather have people stop inviting them and then complain about being excluded than have to confront their own pattern of disrespecting other people's time. Being left also feels more familiar to avoidants than being the one who leaves. Many of them experienced abandonment or emotional neglect in childhood, so being left by someone they care about activates old, familiar pain rather than new, unknown guilt. The familiar pain of abandonment is somehow easier for them to process than the unfamiliar territory of taking responsibility for their own emotional limitations and how those limitations hurt people who love them. There's also a practical element to preferring abandonment over rejection. When someone leaves them, avoidants get to maintain their social image as someone who was willing to commit but got hurt by someone else's inability to handle their authentic self. This narrative is much easier to share with friends and family than admitting they pushed away someone who loved them because intimacy felt too threatening. Being left allows them to get sympathy and support rather than having to explain why they sabotaged a good relationship. The social aspect of this dynamic is often overlooked, but it's crucial. Avoidants care deeply about how others perceive them, even though they often present as independent and unconcerned with social approval. Being abandoned fits their self-image much better than being emotionally unavailable. It's like the difference between being fired from a job for budget cuts versus being fired for poor performance. Both result in unemployment, but one allows you to maintain your professional reputation while the other forces you to confront your own shortcomings. But here's what makes this dynamic so particularly cruel. Avoidants often unconsciously choose partners who are least likely to leave easily. They're drawn to people with anxious attachment styles, people who have high tolerance for emotional unavailability, people who will fight for relationships even when those relationships aren't meeting their needs. They're not choosing these partners to torture them, they're choosing them because their unconscious mind knows these are the people who will stick around long enough for the avoidant to feel truly suffocated by intimacy. These are the people whose eventual departure will feel most validating because it took so much to drive them away. It's like someone who's afraid of heights choosing to live on the highest floor of a building. They're not consciously trying to torture themselves, but they're unconsciously creating situations that will confirm their deepest fears and validate their avoidance strategies. This is why the cycle repeats with different partners. It's not that avoidants are incapable of love or connection. It's that their emotional system is designed to create the very outcome it fears most, and then use that outcome as evidence that avoidance was the right strategy all along. So what does this mean for you? How do you handle being in a relationship with someone whose unconscious mind needs you to leave for them to feel emotionally safe? First, understand that this isn't about you personally. Your departure serves a function in their psychological system that has nothing to do with your worth, your behavior, or your capacity to love someone well. You're not failing them by leaving, and you're not helping them by staying in a relationship that requires you to accept emotional scraps. Second, recognize that you can't love someone out of their attachment style. No amount of patience, understanding, or perfect behavior will change the fact that their nervous system experiences your love as a threat. This isn't a problem you can solve by being a better partner. Third, understand that staying in a relationship with someone who unconsciously needs you to leave is participating in a psychological dynamic that hurts both of you. You're enabling their avoidance while sacrificing your own emotional needs, and they're avoiding the growth that could only come from facing the consequences of their emotional limitations. The most loving thing you can do for an avoidant who needs you to leave is to actually leave, not in anger or retaliation, but with understanding and compassion for both of you. Your departure gives them the psychological relief they need while freeing you to find someone whose nervous system experiences your love as safety rather than threat. This doesn't mean avoidants are incapable of change or that they don't deserve love. It means that sometimes the most loving choice is to stop participating in dynamics that prevent growth for both people involved. When you understand why avoidant partners need you to leave them, you gain something invaluable: the ability to make informed decisions about your own emotional well-being instead of endlessly trying to solve someone else's internal conflict. You're not giving up on love. You're refusing to settle for a relationship dynamic that requires one person's emotional system to be constantly triggered for the other person to feel safe. You're choosing emotional health over emotional familiarity. Most importantly, you're breaking the cycle that keeps both of you stuck in patterns that serve neither of your true emotional needs. Have you recognized this pattern in your relationship with an avoidant partner? Drop a comment about how understanding this dynamic changed your perspective. If this helped you see avoidant behavior in a new light, like this video, and subscribe for more insights about attachment styles and relationship patterns that actually serve your emotional growth. Thanks for watching.